disappearance that froze time in the quaint mountain town of Elmridge, where the trees whispered secrets and fog clung to the streets like forgotten memories. A woman named Lena Marlowe vanished without a trace. It was October 13, 2016, a cold Thursday morning. Lena had left her home at 6:45 a.m., bundled in her red coat, heading to work at the local library. She waved goodbye to her husband, Marcus, kissed her young daughter goodbye, and stepped into the mist. She never made it to the library. She never came home. She never called. She never existed again, at least not in the way people remembered her. For 7 years, Lena Marlowe became a ghost. Flyers faded. Candlelight vigils were held. The police scoured every path, drained every lake, tracked every camera, and spoke to every witness. Nothing. Not a trace. Not a single clue. What haunted the town most was the absence of evidence. It was like Lena had been erased. The years passed. Marcus eventually moved away with their daughter, unable to bear the weight of waiting. Her case became a local legend, a ghost story told to newcomers. Until exactly 2,558 days later, Lena Marlowe reappeared. On a warm June morning in 2023, a woman was spotted walking barefoot along Route 19, 5 miles from where she'd vanished. She was confused, disoriented, and murmuring the same thing over and over again. "Where's the library? I'm going to be late." She was wearing the same red coat. No scratches, no signs of harm, no sign she had aged a single day. When she was brought to the hospital, doctors were stunned. Her vitals were normal. Her memory stopped at that October morning in 2016. To her, not a single second had passed. But for the rest of the world, 7 years had gone by. How could a woman disappear for 2,558 days, return unaged, unharmed, and unaware of any time lost? What happened in those 7 years? And perhaps more terrifying, where had she really been? This is not just a story of vanishing. It's a descent into something deeper, a fracture in time, a tear in our understanding of reality. Some believe Lena encountered a scientific anomaly. Others whisper of something ancient, watching from the woods. And some say she never came back at all, not really, because the Lena who returned wasn't entirely human. The day she returned, it was June 21st, 2023, a morning like any other. The sun had just begun to spill over the misty hills of Elmridge. The local diner was opening its doors. Morning joggers were out on their usual paths, and the sleepy town was waking up. Then came the 911 call. A woman had been found wandering along Route 19. She was barefoot, muddied, silent, and something was wrong. "She keeps saying she's late for the library," the caller reported. "I think she's hurt, or confused, or both." By the time police arrived, she was seated on the roadside, clutching her coat tightly, eyes wide and vacant. When asked her name, she answered, "Lena Marlowe. I work at the library." Her voice was calm, her tone normal, but her presence, it sent chills down the spine of every officer present. She looked exactly as she had in the missing person flyers, not just similar. Identical, not a wrinkle, not a blemish. Not even a scratch on her coat. She was taken to Elmridge General Hospital for evaluation. Nurses ran blood tests, neurological exams, and psychological screenings. Her body temperature was slightly lower than normal, but everything else? Unremarkable. Physically, she was fine. Mentally, she believes it's still 2016, said Dr. Rachel Lynn, the attending neurologist. Her memory hasn't aged a day. It's as if the past 7 years don't exist for her. Because they didn't. When Lena was shown a mirror, her face didn't even register surprise. She simply whispered, "I look the same. Of course I do." But the truth was harder for others to process. Outside the hospital, news spread like wildfire. Missing woman returns after 7 years. Has not aged. Miracle in Elmridge? Is this even possible? But amid the headlines and hashtags, Marcus, Lena's husband, heard the news first in a phone call. He hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in years. He was remarried. His daughter, now 13, barely remembered her mother. He didn't want to believe it. He drove back to Elmridge anyway, and when he walked into the hospital room and saw her, standing there, smiling faintly, her hands outstretched like she'd only been gone a few hours, he collapsed. The shock wasn't just personal. It was existential. Her fingerprints matched. Her DNA matched. She remembered birthdays, favorite books, the names of friends long gone. But she couldn't remember a single detail about where she'd been. When asked what happened after she left home that day, she answered calmly, "I walked through the woods. The path was foggy. I remember hearing music. Then everything felt soft. Like a dream." She blinked. "Then I was here." Just like that. The doctors called it dissociative fugue. Some speculated a rare coma. Others suggested she had been kidnapped, though she bore no trauma. But there was one fact that not even science could explain. Every hair follicle, every skin cell, every cell in her body showed no signs of aging. No human body could do that, unless it had been preserved, or it had never truly left the moment it vanished. And that's when the real fear began. Because if Lena hadn't been here, in this world, where had she gone? Whispers in the fog. In the days following her return, Lena Marlowe was moved to a private psychiatric facility for observation. Not because she was unstable, she wasn't, but because what she represented frightened people, even those closest to her. What disturbed the doctors most wasn't what she remembered. It was what she couldn't. Over and over, specialists asked her to describe the moment she vanished. She always started the same way. "I took the forest trail that day, the one behind the bakery. The mist was heavier than usual. Felt thick. I could barely see my shoes." She described the trees narrowing in, as though they were closing around her. She remembered the air growing still, unnaturally so. Then a strange humming sound, like electricity, but gentler, almost musical. I remember thinking, this isn't normal. I tried to turn around, but her voice always dropped. The path behind me was gone. Psychologists dismissed it as trauma-induced hallucination. But there were details Lena remembered that couldn't be explained. She described the taste of the fog like metal. She remembered floating, as if her feet were no longer on solid ground. And most haunting of all, there were voices, soft like whispers, not threatening, but not human either. When asked what the voices said, she paused for a long time, and finally answered. They kept repeating, "You are not ready yet." No one knew what it meant, and no one really wanted to. Meanwhile, Lena's reappearance was being dissected by internet theorists, scientists, occult researchers, and conspiracy groups. Some believed she had slipped into a time fold, a space between dimensions. Others claimed she'd been taken by a government black project and returned after experimentation. But the most chilling theory came from an unlikely source, a man named Elijah Crow, an ex-forestry officer who had vanished for 48 hours in 1997 and claimed to have seen a place outside of time. He reached out anonymously to local reporters and wrote, "That woman Lena, she walked through the fog. If she heard the whispers, then she was marked. I was too, but I got away before they could keep me." When asked who they were, Elijah only responded, "Not who, what?" By the end of the week, Lena was allowed outside for supervised walks on the hospital grounds. She always avoided the trees. She said they made her stomach ache, that the shadows between the branches felt alive. One afternoon, a nurse found Lena standing still beneath a tree, hands stretched toward the bark. When asked what she was doing, she whispered, "I hear them again. They're getting louder." She hadn't been near the forest. And yet, something had followed her out of it. Something had changed in Lena. She was still Lena Marlowe, but there were cracks in her voice now, glitches in her memory, and sometimes in her reflection. She said she could see a version of herself that didn't move in sync. She told the doctors, "I don't know if I came back alone." The mirror test, the facility's lead psychiatrist, Dr. Adrian Heller, believed Lena was experiencing a rare form of time displacement psychosis, a mind fractured by trauma, clinging to its last real memory to survive. But there were inconsistencies. When Lena spoke, the clock in her room would stutter. The lights above her flickered with no electrical faults. Animals on the hospital grounds avoided her path. Even the mirrors, staff began to notice, acted strangely around her. Dr. Heller decided to conduct what he later referred to in his notes as the mirror test. A harmless procedure, he claimed, but his tone had changed when recounting it. "We placed a full-length mirror in the therapy room. I asked Lena to stand in front of it, to describe herself, to tell me what she saw. First, everything was normal. Lena described her red coat, her pale skin, her green eyes. But then she paused. Her face tightened, her breathing slowed, and she asked something strange. 'Do you see what I see?' Dr. Heller replied yes, but Lena just shook her head. 'No, that's not me. She's behind me.' There was no one behind her. The footage from the security camera showed nothing out of the ordinary at first, but when the recording was slowed to 1 frame per second, something disturbing appeared. For a split second, at frame 712, Lena's reflection smiled before she did. Not just a delay, a different expression entirely. And then 1 frame later, they were in sync again. Dr. Heller shut the test down immediately. He ordered the mirror removed, but Lena protested violently. "You can't take her away. She'll be angry." She said she waited long enough. She thrashed, screamed. It took 2 orderlies to restrain her. She calmed only when the mirror was brought back. And then, as if in a trance, she whispered, "She's not done yet." The staff no longer entered Lena's room alone after that. The mirror was eventually covered with a black cloth. But Lena continued to speak to it, as though someone still stood behind the veil. One night, a nurse reported hearing 2 voices coming from Lena's room. One was clearly Lena. The other sounded similar but deeper, slower. The audio tape played back only one voice, but when reversed, it revealed a chilling sentence. "You brought her back. Now you pay the toll." What was the toll? No one knew. But one by one, the hospital staff began to experience strange phenomena. A nurse found her own reflection blinking out of sync. A janitor claimed he was followed by footsteps he couldn't trace. Dr. Heller himself began to have recurring dreams of walking into the woods and never returning. Lena remained calm through it all. In her quietest moments, she spoke as if another self was waiting for the right moment, like a sleeper beneath ice, waiting for the thaw. And then one morning, the mirror shattered on its own. No one was in the room. Whatever Lena had brought back, it was no longer content with staying on the other side. And perhaps it never had. The forest that remembers, the town of Elmridge, had always been known for its forests, thick, endless, and ancient. Before roads were built, before maps were drawn, the woods had been there. Locals said the trees were older than time. Some avoided them altogether, even during the day. Lena's disappearance, and now her bizarre return, renewed old fears. The path she had vanished on, Fox Hollow Trail, had long since grown over. But after Lena began speaking about voices in the fog, researchers decided to investigate the place where it had all begun. A team from the university, including a botanist, an atmospheric scientist, and a paranormal researcher, entered the woods with cameras, drones, and sensors. Within 40 minutes, their GPS devices stopped working. Compass needles spun. Cell signals vanished. Drones lost connection. And then the fog rolled in fast, thick, and unnatural. They had to call the search off. But before leaving, one of the team members, Dr. Syra Voss, spotted something unsettling. Half buried in the soil, near the trail's edge, was Lena's missing wristwatch. The same one she'd been wearing when she disappeared 7 years ago. The glass was cracked. The hands were frozen at 6:52 a.m., the exact minute Lena vanished. When shown the watch in her hospital room, Lena refused to touch it. She backed away, eyes wide, shaking her head. It's still ticking, but not here. What did she mean? Her meaning became clearer 2 nights later, when a hiker went missing near the same trail. Music shift, a subtle rising tension, soft rumble under deep strings, building pressure without release. Jackson Fielding, age 28, an experienced backpacker. He'd been filming a nature vlog. His last transmission was a 30-second clip uploaded live to his followers. In the video, he pauses mid-sentence. The fog rolls in behind him. He turns, and then he says something strange. "Do you hear that?" It's whispering. The camera glitches. Cuts out. That was the last anyone saw of him. Search teams found nothing, except for his backpack, sitting in the exact spot Lena had described hearing the music 7 years earlier. Inside the backpack was his camera. The footage was corrupted, but audio technicians managed to recover one reverse sentence from the static. "She opened the way. It cannot be closed." Lena grew restless after Jackson's disappearance. She began drawing on the walls of her room, crude spirals, strange tree-like symbols, and one recurring shape, a circle with vertical slashes running through it like a wound in the sky. Dr. Heller asked her what it meant. She whispered, "It's the door, the one I left open. They want me to go back." Researchers returned to Fox Hollow with specialized audio gear. At 3:15 a.m., the exact hour Lena would wake screaming each night, they picked up something, a frequency buried below human hearing. When boosted, it resembled whispers layered over whispers. Not quite language, but not random either. And among them, one phrase stood out, clear, deliberate. "Bring her back." The trees had been watching. The forest had been waiting. Whatever Lena had walked into, she hadn't just disappeared. She had crossed into something else, something alive. And now it wanted her back. The door beneath the skin weeks passed. Lena Marlowe remained confined to her hospital room, physically healthy, mentally stable on the surface. But beneath that calm exterior, something was beginning to crack. Not her mind, her body. It began with the dreams. Each night, at exactly 3:15 a.m., Lena would wake up drenched in sweat, whispering words no one recognized. Doctors thought it was trauma manifesting, but Lena insisted, "They're not dreams. They're instructions." Then came the bruising. Strange, geometric bruises began appearing on her back. Perfect circles, angled lines, patterns that seemed too deliberate for injury. A dermatologist was brought in. He ran tests, took photos. What he found chilled him to the bone. The bruises were not bruises. They were raised patterns beneath the skin, as if something had been carved into her from the inside. When the images were analyzed, they matched ancient ritualistic symbols once associated with a prehistoric culture. One believed to have vanished over 10,000 years ago in the Elmridge region. Lena didn't seem surprised. She told the doctors, "They marked me when I walked through. It's how they know I'm still theirs. They told me I wasn't supposed to leave." What was even more terrifying was how her body reacted to certain stimuli. MRI machines would shut down when she was near. Monitors glitched. Lights dimmed. And one time, when she touched an old mirror in the psych ward, it spiderwebbed instantly, from the inside out. But the worst moment came when she was placed under hypnosis, at the request of Dr. Heller, in an attempt to retrieve memories from the missing years. At first, she resisted. Then she gave in, and her voice changed. She began to speak in a language no one understood, fluently, urgently. The audio was sent to a linguist. After weeks of analysis, only one sentence could be interpreted, reconstructed from phonetic similarities to Proto-Indo-European fragments. The door must remain open, or all will return. Dr. Heller began experiencing psychosomatic symptoms shortly after that session. Nosebleeds, migraines, visual hallucinations of Lena's reflection watching him from mirrors, even when she wasn't in the room. He wrote in his final log, "I've begun to suspect Lena didn't just pass through a door. I believe she became one. A door for what he couldn't say. But the signs were clear. Lena's body was changing. Not visibly, but energetically. She was becoming a beacon, a transmitter, and something on the other side was listening." When Lena looked into the mirror now, she didn't see herself anymore. She saw a forest without end, a fog that reached up like fingers, and beyond that fog, in a space without light or time, a figure watching her and smiling, the thing that wears her face. After Lena's hypnotic session, she became different. Not outwardly, her face remained the same, her voice unchanged, but something about her presence began to distort the world around her. Patients in the facility reported seeing her twice in the same hallway. Security footage began to show her standing still for hours, unmoving, when no one remembered seeing her there at all. Then one night, the facility's night nurse, Haley Dawson, left a note on her shift report. Lena came to the desk at 2:47 a.m. asking for water. "I got it." She smiled, thanked me. Then I turned around, and she was already down the hallway, walking in the other direction. The footage confirmed it. Two Lenas, one at the desk, one already leaving. The camera glitched in the moment they overlapped, like static had bled through the air itself. From that night onward, Lena began to refer to herself in plural. "We are tired," she would say. "We don't belong here. We were not meant to be separate." Dr. Heller began to believe something terrifying, that Lena hadn't returned alone. She had brought something back, and now it was wearing her like a mask. On July 5th, an orderly named Daniel Reyes was found unconscious outside Lena's room. His eyes were open, but he wasn't blinking. When he was revived, he repeated a single sentence over and over. "She looked at me through the mirror," but her face didn't blink. He was sedated and never came back to work. The footage from that night, missing. The hard drive containing the surveillance video had melted from the inside, with no sign of external heat damage. As Lena's condition deteriorated, something else began to take shape in the background. Across Elmridge, other people began reporting sightings of Lena in places she couldn't be. At the gas station, at the old library, standing in their backyards watching from the tree-line. One woman, terrified, called police after she found Lena standing in her daughter's room, just before dawn. When officers arrived, the window was open, but no sign of Lena inside the facility had changed. She'd never left her room. Then came the incident with Marcus, Lena's former husband. He came to visit her, out of guilt, out of fear. No one knew. The nurse escorting him noted that as he entered the room, Lena looked hungry. Not in a physical sense, but something deeper, like recognition from prey. He sat down, and within 5 minutes, ran screaming down the hallway, blood pouring from his ears. All he said before losing consciousness was, "That's not Lena. That's something using her skin." Medical scans performed on Lena the next day revealed something impossible. Her brain activity was duplicated. Two separate waveforms, running in parallel. Two identities coexisting, but one dominant. The doctors thought it was possession. The scientists thought it was a parasite. The priests who visited called her a broken vessel. And Lena? She just smiled. "We're almost ready now," she whispered. "Soon, there will be more." It became clear. The thing wearing her face was practicing, learning, mimicking, and eventually it would no longer need Lena at all, because it wouldn't be inside her anymore. It would be loose. The fracture point. By late July, Elmridge had become unstable, not just in the hospital, but across the entire town. People began suffering from shared hallucinations, nightmares that were eerily similar, a forest that moved, voices whispering names that hadn't been spoken aloud, a woman in a red coat, standing at the edge of their beds, watching and waiting. The town psychiatrist reported a spike in schizophrenia diagnoses, over 14 new cases in 1 week. But all those patients shared one thing. They had either seen Lena or dreamed of her. The townspeople began calling it the fracture, not a disease, not a haunting, a break in time, in place, in self. And Lena was the center of it. One evening, a power outage struck the hospital. All backup generators failed simultaneously. The lights went black. Security rushed to Lena's room. They found her gone. Only a spiral symbol was drawn on the mirror. One long, continuous swirl etched in what looked like blood. Within the hour, Lena was spotted by 9 separate people, in 9 separate places, one at the edge of the woods, one walking barefoot through the old churchyard, one inside a locked police cruiser. Each sighting matched her appearance perfectly. Surveillance footage from all 9 locations showed the same thing. A glitch, a blur, a figure turning to the camera and smiling. Meanwhile, a team of quantum researchers from the State University was brought in to investigate Lena's strange brain scans. What they discovered sent one of them into a full psychotic breakdown. There were quantum anomalies in the neural pattern, nonlinear time loops embedded in her cognition. Moments that repeated, moments that hadn't happened yet. Lena wasn't just remembering the past. She was leaking it backwards and forwards. She had become a living fracture in time, a loop point for something to cross through. Dr. Heller, now unshaven and exhausted, began to document what he called the unraveling. He wrote, "The woman who came back is not alone. She is a vessel, but vessels crack, and from those cracks, something is leaking into us." He began to experience time slips, writing notes he didn't remember writing, waking up in rooms he never entered. And he wasn't the only one. Half the hospital staff began seeing events before they happened. A nurse said she dreamed of a patient dying, and then it happened down to the last detail. But the most disturbing shift came one night at 3:15 a.m. when Lena returned. She didn't speak. She just stood at the hospital entrance and smiled. Security footage shows her never opening the door. She just appears on one frame, then steps forward. She was calm, serene, but behind her, the glass doors cracked outward, as if something much larger had just passed through. The fracture had widened. Lena had become more than a person. She was a conduit, a two-way door between here and somewhere else. And whatever was waiting on the other side was almost here, the echoes that walk. After Lena's return, the town of Elmridge stopped dreaming. Literally. Sleep researchers at the local university noticed a strange trend. 90% of residents reported no dream recall at all. The few who did remember their dreams, each one spoke of the same thing: a woman who whispers in colors, a red coat that follows me, even when I wake up, a version of myself watching me sleep. Then came the first impossible deaths. A local librarian was found dead in his locked apartment, face frozen in terror, with no physical trauma. On his walls were hand-scrawled words repeated over and over. I see her when I close my eyes. He had attended Lena's high school. They weren't friends, but he once told a friend years ago, she disappeared on my birthday. Every year since, I feel like something's counting. Soon, reports began flooding in from surrounding towns. People claiming they saw someone wearing their face, waving to them from across a river, waiting at train stations, and each one described them the same way, same eyes, same hands, but no emotion, like a mirror had learned how to walk. They began calling them the echoes. Dr. Heller was among the first to understand what was happening. The echoes are bleed-throughs. They're not ghosts. They're possibilities, versions of people that could have been or might still be. They were not hallucinations. They were real, but from somewhere else, from where Lena had gone. Then something stranger happened. The echoes began to speak, first in whispers, then in full sentences, always starting the same way. We remember. We are what's left. She opened the way. Witnesses said their voices sounded like three tones speaking in unison, like one soul fractured into layers. One girl swore her echo told her, "You were never supposed to wake up here," and vanished. Soon, the town's mirrors were covered. People stopped looking into reflective surfaces, not out of superstition, but because they started seeing echoes that weren't themselves, people who hadn't died, or hadn't yet. Some mirrors refused to reflect. Others reflected future events. One man looked into his bathroom mirror and saw his own corpse behind him. The next day, he was gone. This wasn't possession. This was pattern distortion. Elmridge was no longer a town. It was a crossing, where timelines buckled, where identities became optional, and where one woman, or what she carried, had begun rewriting the rules of existence. And Lena? She stopped speaking entirely. She would sit for hours, staring into polished surfaces, glass, metal, water, like she was waiting for something to come back through, or for someone else to come out. One day, without warning, she said something that no one could explain. The echoes are the lucky ones. They only walk in one direction. We spiral. She tilted her head and whispered, "He's waking up." When asked who he was, she smiled. And every light in the facility flickered once, then twice, then failed completely. The one who wakes. After the lights failed, Elmridge vanished from radar. Literally. Satellite scans of the region showed nothing, just a blank smear. GPS devices refused to lock. Cell signals cut off mid-call. News stations went silent. And yet, the town still existed, just not quite here. It had slipped, like Lena had, but on a larger scale. Inside the hospital, chaos broke out. Patients reported time dislocations. Clocks spun backward. People vanished, then reappeared days younger or decades older. Security cameras captured a nurse standing perfectly still for 14 hours, only to blink once and whisper, "He's dreaming through her." Dr. Heller, now completely isolated, wrote his final report by hand. Time is no longer linear. It's folded. Lena is the crease, and something is pushing from the other side. He called it the sleeper, not a ghost, not a demon, but a consciousness trapped outside our time, using Lena as a lens, a mirror to our world. And then Lena spoke again, not in her voice, not in any known voice, but in many voices layered into one, through speakers, radios, even unplugged devices. "I see you. I made you. You live in the echo of my sleep." People across town collapsed. Some bled from the nose. Some simply stopped moving, frozen in time. And in Lena's room, something opened. Not a doorway, not a portal, a hole, a spiral of darkness, slowly widening, drawing in light, time, sound. Nurses said they saw versions of themselves inside it, screaming for help. Others saw cities on fire, skies filled with red clouds, and a man made entirely of clock parts, reaching toward them. Dr. Heller entered the room and approached Lena. She was calm, smiling, her eyes completely black. She whispered, "He's almost done dreaming." And with that, the spiral grew louder, louder, until all sound collapsed into a single word: wake. Dr. Heller's body was found 48 hours later, but the autopsy revealed something terrifying. His organs had aged 70 years, but his brain had rewound itself, like someone had recorded over his mind. The last words in his notebook: "It's not Lena. It never was. She's just the page. He's the hand that writes." Then one morning, it stopped. The spiral vanished. Lena's eyes returned to normal. The town reappeared on satellite. No explanation, no announcement. Lena was found asleep in her bed, breathing, peaceful. But every mirror in town was now black. They no longer reflected anything, and all the clocks in Elmridge stuck at 3:15 a.m. They declared Lena stable. The case was closed. But one final detail remains. A janitor found a tape recorder under Lena's bed. It was playing a looped message. 5 words over and over. "He dreams in spiral time." Then the tape burned itself to ash without flame. Lena still hasn't aged. She sleeps for days at a time, and sometimes she speaks in voices that don't belong here. Not male, not female, not human. People say when she talks, the air gets thicker, that glass ripples, and if you listen closely, you can hear ticking inside her breath.